Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. All right, everybody, I'm back. Good to be back. College hoops off-season grades rolls on. By now, you know the story. We're hitting on all the big programs, what they did this spring, what it means for the fall. We're going to run these really probably until about the middle of July, taking us up to college football media days. At that point, it's going to be full speed ahead with college football. But for now, college hoops offseason grades. We've done Louisville. We've done Florida. We've done UConn. We've done UNC. We've done a bunch of others. Today, it is the Duke Blue Devils. Probably worth noting a couple caveats before we get into Duke. I am recording this before I go on vacation the last week of June. You could tell by the shirt, by the way. I'm basically already in vacay mode. I was like, I like this shirt. I just bought it. I ain't changing. I don't care, okay? But that is relevant with Duke for two specific reasons. One, the schedule as I record is not totally complete, okay? There's talk of a Michigan State game in December. There's talk of a Michigan game in February. We don't have dates yet. So by the time you watch this, you may. Don't yell at me if the schedule is official by the time you've seen this. Also, and I think it's something completely unique to Duke, we're doing this before the NBA draft. You might not watch it until after the NBA draft, where I think Duke could and maybe likely will have 3 top 10 picks. We know Cooper Flagg's going number 1 to Dallas. I think Con Knippel is probably right on that fringe top 5 guy. And I think Kaman Malawach might go top 10. So it's worth noting those are things that have not yet happened by the time you'll watch it. Now, let's get into Duke. Okay, so Duke, it's funny. We're going to talk about the offseason and what they've done. It's worth going back and talking about this past season, though, because I think, look, it's Duke. They're one of the glamour programs, Blue Bloods, but I still think when I look back at what I thought about this team this time last year, I do think they kind of exceeded expectations in 2024, 2025, right? You go back to this time last year, there's so much excitement for Cooper Flagg, but you have really not a lot of returning production, right? It's Tyrese Proctor, it's Caleb Foster, that's it. I remember doing segments when they lost 7 players to the transfer portal last spring, and you worried about the impact, not a lot of returnees. And then, oh, by the way, you're going to be relying on freshmen outside of Cooper Flagg. And you knew the portal haul was good, but Sion James, okay, he's coming from Tulane. How good will he be? He'll be good, but will he be that good? Mason Gillis, Malik Brown, et cetera, et cetera. Well, I bring it up because it became pretty apparent pretty quick that this team was special. This team was maybe better than anybody, including me, gave them credit for in the preseason. Open up, you play early in the season. You obviously do lose that Kentucky game, crazy game, back and forth game. You don't get the win there, but you go to Tucson, you get a victory over a good Arizona team. You lose to Kansas. Again, the Kansas-Kentucky game could go either way. But then you hit mid-November, late November into December, and it's like you start to realize, oh, this team has a chance to be very good. The big one, they obviously beat Auburn at home. Auburn was number 1 in the country at that point, dominating everybody. You open Big 12. You open ACC play at 12-0. You beat Louisville at Louisville. You have some success early, and it just becomes obvious, like, oh, this team is really freaking good. Even when you lose to Clemson, they blow through the back half of the ACC schedule. You finish 19-1. You win the ACC tournament. You beat Illinois in that game at Madison Square Garden. And you just realize, like, damn, this team is so good. And as we start to look ahead to this year, the thing that stood out even last year was that positional size. Everybody 6'5", 6'6" across the board, 7'1" Malawach. And it takes you all the way through ACC play with only 1 loss. Into the NCAA tournament, you dominate that East region. And listen, we all remember where we were, what happened against Houston. I don't think it takes away from the fact that Duke had an unbelievable season, 4 number 1 seeds in San Antonio. Only one team was going to win it all. It ends up being the Gators. You're always going to wonder what if, but you don't want to take away from what Duke did last season. Now to look ahead, though, that's where it gets interesting because to me, I want to give Jon Scheyer some credit. Listen, you know, the X's and O's stuff, it's going to get better as time goes on. And I think it's pretty good already. But at the same time, what I think he unlocked last year, and I actually asked him about this at one of the Final Four press conferences, is that positional size, building around an elite one-and-done talent. Again, I thought he did as good of a job as you possibly could have building around Cooper Flagg last year. And I think he largely took that blueprint with Cam Boozer into this offseason. And so let's get into what the Duke Blue Devils are going to look like next year. First of all, big difference between Duke at this time this year versus last year. They actually have a lot of production coming back. And, you know, it's funny because I've said all offseason, there were a few teams that were going to be defined in the offseason by who they could retain. I thought it was that way for UConn. I thought it was that way for Arkansas, for BYU. I don't know that I necessarily really felt that way about Duke, but to their credit, what is the stat? I think they were one of 3 teams that did not lose a single player to the transfer portal. And there were a lot of guys that you could sit there and say, like, realistically could have gone. 5 guys coming back. All of them really didn't play huge roles. I think Isaiah Evans could have gone into the NBA draft and realistically been drafted. And instead, they all said, I want to come back. I want to be part of what we're doing this coming season. So let's go ahead and dive into the returnees. First of all, Caleb Foster, third-year player. He was kind of one. You know, he was a guy, you know, primary ball handler, was a starter early in the year, kind of came off the bench as the season went on. You kind of wondered, would he return? He comes back. He's a key veteran. Isaiah Evans, Slim, you know, listen, like I said, I think he is one of those guys that, in my opinion, could have gone into the NBA draft, stayed in the NBA draft, and been drafted. Yes, he only averaged 7 points a game, but 6'6" forward, 42% shooting from 3. We all remember that game against Auburn in the ACC SEC Challenge where he dropped, 18 first-half points on 6 3-pointers. Pat Ngongba, who, oh, by the way, shout out Pat Ngongba, who won our Final Four trivia when we were at the Final Four last year. He's back after averaging 4 points per game. I mean, he's the perfect example. Top 25 recruit, didn't play much last year, behind Kaman Malawach, easily could have said, you know what, I just want to see what else is out there. Instead, he's back. And then the other key guy, you know, I don't think people realize how good Malik Brown was unless you're a Duke fan. 6'9", as you can see on the screen, got votes for both Sixth Man of the Year and Defensive Player of the Year in the ACC. Averaged about a steal and a half per game, about a block per game. Just one of the most versatile defensive players in college basketball. And I just don't think you can put a value on how good and how important some of those guys are in the offseason. In terms of the newcomers, because to me, this is also important as well. A lot of good freshmen. You don't need as much out of the portal because of how much you have coming back. As far as who's coming in, we all know where it starts. It's with Cam Boozer, 6'10", 6'11". Listen, there's I don't even know, can you be hyperbolic on this kid? Because all this kid has done is produced everywhere, won everything you can see on the screen, 3 Peach Jam titles, 3 Florida State championships, 2 gold medals for both Boozer twins. So I don't want to undersell Caden, but Cam Boozer, goes on that Team USA last year. Him and DeBonsa just destroy everyone on the way to gold. I mean, that is going to go down potentially as one of the great, amateur teams of all time with AJ DeBonsa, Koa Pete, Cam Boozer, Caden Boozer, all those guys. But Cam Boozer is phenomenal, a double-double machine. I don't think it's hyperbole to say that I think he should probably be favored to win ACC Player of the Year. I think he has that much potential. And then I don't want to undersell what his brother Caden can do as well. I've said it before, because Cam Boozer is so good, I don't think Caden gets enough credit for what he is capable of. He's a 6'4", 6'5" point guard, gets everybody involved, gets other people, makes other people better. And again, because his brother is so good, probably just doesn't get the credit that he deserves as the type of player that he can be. You also add Nick Kamania, who is from not far from where I live here in the San Fernando Valley in Los Angeles. And then late, credit to Jon Scheyer. You needed more production on the wing. You think you have Cedric Coward. You don't get Cedric Coward. Cedric Coward decides to stay in the draft. Dame Sarr, it appears, is set to go to Kansas. And then last minute, Jon Scheyer swoops in, adds the 6'6" Italian forward, 17 points, 4 rebounds in the Nike Hoop Summit game. Top international prospect entering college basketball this year, according to some recruiting services. And I think he's another one. He's going to be a first-round pick next year. And so to add a first-round caliber talent in whatever it was, I think it was early May by the time he committed and signed, he is a guy that I am as intrigued by as just about anybody. Now, really quickly, worth noting, Duke was a little bit quieter in the portal this offseason. As mentioned, Cedric Coward was committed. I had him as a top 10 portal player. He ends up staying in the draft. But again, one, you replace him with Dame Sarr. By the way, Duke did add another big guy from Rice as well in the portal. But I think what's worth noting on Duke in the portal, there's just, you don't need to add as much in the portal this year as you did last year because you have 5 guys coming back from last year's team. So when you have 5 key guys with basically 4 McDonald's All-Americans, I know Dame Sarr isn't, but Dame Sarr, I don't think 24/7 put international players in the high school ranks. I mean, Dame Sarr would have been a top 12, top 15 player in this class at worst. Nick Kamania is kind of the same. 4 top 20 players, 5 returnees, Cam Boozer's maybe the ACC preseason player of the year. And so, yeah, there's a lot to like. You know what else there is to like? How about this schedule? Okay, so listen, Jon Scheyer, I think one thing I'll just say kind of big picture, I'm going to go on a little tangent here, is, there was so much, I think, I don't know what the right word is, but there was just so much when all of these big name coaches retired all one after the other, right? Jay Wright and Roy Williams and Coach K, and what does it all mean for college basketball? And then you see a guy like Jon Scheyer come in with a plan, with a blueprint. And I think one thing that he really wanted to do was kind of reinvigorate out-of-conference scheduling for Duke. Last year, the huge game against Kansas in Vegas, what was it? The Tuesday or Wednesday before Thanksgiving. I can't remember if it was Tuesday or Wednesday. I was actually at the game. But, you have that. You have a bunch of things that he has planned for this year. So let's look at this schedule because there's a lot of schools claiming they have the toughest schedule in college basketball coming into this season. I think Duke's probably actually we can't even fit all the big games on one graphic. Okay. Look at this schedule. So first of all, second night of the year, this is really cool. Texas, remember Texas, Sean Miller is the new head coach of Texas. They are going to be better. They are not a pushover. They're playing Texas. Duke is playing Texas in Charlotte. That is called the Dickie V Invitational. They are naming a game after Dick Vitale. I think that's super cool. Remember, we have the doubleheader in Vegas, the first Monday night of college hoops. We get this on Tuesday, first big game for Duke, season opener. A couple weeks later, by the way, should mention, this isn't even on the graphic. I saw this as I was prepping. I forgot this. Duke is going to play Army at Army. Obviously, there's Coach K ties. That's freaking cool, okay? So that is really cool. You then from there go play Kansas in the Champions Classic. The big one, it's funny, we recorded the Arkansas and Duke offseason grades back-to-back. Thanksgiving night, Duke, Arkansas in Chicago. CBS national game. Again, I think it's Jon Scheyer understanding the brand, understanding what Duke basketball in a standalone game on Thanksgiving means. And then, oh, by the way, no rest for the weary after that, because how about this? Duke against Florida in the ACC SEC Challenge, that we don't have an official date for that yet, but that game will be in Cameron Indoor, defending champs at Duke, probably the most anticipated game of that challenge. Duke, Texas Tech at Madison Square Garden, so a second trip to MSG, playing Texas Tech right before Thanksgiving or right before Christmas. And then again, what we mentioned earlier, which is Michigan State. They are projected or expected to play them at the Breslin Center this year. And then again, to continue with what I said a minute ago about Jon Scheyer understanding the responsibility. Last year, he was very vocal about that late, that February out of conference game. Okay. I'm going to date myself a little bit, but when I was younger, when I was a kid, there always seemed to be 2, 3, 4 marquee out-of-conference games in February to kind of just break up the monotony of the schedule. And I think as time went on, schedules got tougher. the metrics for how teams were picked for the NCAA tournament changed. And I think a lot of schools just said, look, I'm not going to take a huge game out of conference in the middle of the conference slate. It's like I'm trying to win a conference championship. I'm not going to go play some random team. Well, I bring it up because the reports are, I think John Rothstein was the first one to have it. Last year, they played Illinois at Madison Square Garden in February. This year, they are expected to play Michigan at some point in February as well. As anybody who's listened to me knows, I love Michigan. I think Michigan has no worse than the top 10 team, and I am so excited to see that one. So, Duke, insane schedule. Matt, pop up that graphic again. I want to see it really quick. I want to do the math. What is that? 7 marquee out of so the ACC. Now, I will say one thing that's worth noting: the ACC is going back down to 18 league games, so that's part of it. But of their 13 out of conference games, 7 of them are against teams that will probably start in the preseason top 25. I do not have Michigan State in my most recent one, but they were basically the first team out. But again, Florida, defending champs, Kansas, Arkansas, Texas Tech, Michigan, Texas, on and on. All right. Off-season grade. What am I supposed to say? It's got to be an A, right? It's got to be an A. What is the if you don't want to give Duke an A, what's the argument? Number 1 high school recruiting class in the country. 5 players that are returning from a team that just made the Final Four. You only had 1 player from the portal, but it's because you lost 0 players to the portal. And so, I mean, if you want to be super nitpicky, I'm trying to be nitpicky. I can't really think of anything. Duke's going to be awesome. Duke's off-season grade. They get an A. If you want to fight me, that's fine. They deserve it. And I'll say this, man. I think I love how Shire schedules, and I think he's really figured out how to build rosters. Now, gets to a Final Four, back obviously made the Elite Eight 2 seasons ago. He's at Duke. He's going to eventually be judged by national championships, but he's 35, 36 years old. And I just bring it up because this dude knows how to build. And by the way, I don't care that he's at Duke, because look at some of these teams. North Carolina was a disaster last year. All their guards were 5'11". So he knows how to build a roster. He knows how to schedule. I am so excited to watch this team. That is your Duke offseason grade. Duke gets an A. Reminder, 1, if you're not subscribed to the pod, make sure to do so. Apple, Spotify, YouTube. We have a separate tab for all of our offseason grades. If you want to go on a little college hoops binge, you can watch them all back to back to back. They are, of course, also available on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. We'll be back soon with another edition of College Hoops offseason grades.